Hi guys, and welcome to today's Dear session. We are reading The Highland Falcon Thief, written by M.G. Leonard and Sam Sedgman, illustrated by Eliza Paganelli. Published by Pan Macmillan UK, who have very kindly given us the permission to read this book, and for me to share it with you during this time indoors. Chapter 12. The Invention of Time. So, Uncle Nat said, putting an arm around Hal's shoulder, steering him into their compartment and closing the door. Where have you been? Hal sat on the sofa, noticing the beds had been put away. He wanted to tell the truth, but he wasn't about to break his promise to Lenny and her dad, so he swallowed. Nowhere? Uncle Nat sat down in his desk chair. Nowhere, yes, I used to go there when I was a younger man. He smiled, but his eyes looked serious. Hal, it would be better if you told me what you're up to. I can't, Hal blurted out. I promised. Uncle Nat blinked, took off his glasses, and cleaned them with a cloth from the inside pocket of his jacket. How about I tell you where I think you might have been, and you nod your head if I'm right? He put his glasses back on and grinned. That way, you won't be breaking any promises. Hal thought about this for a moment, and then nodded. I noticed you entered the corridor from that direction, his uncle pointed. That means you were in either of the other carriage of compartments, the royal carriage or the service cars. He looked at Hal expectantly. Or you could have been on the footplate. Hal furrowed his brow, trying to stop a smile from spreading across his face. If you did happen to find someone kind enough to take you onto the footplate, then you would have witnessed the extraordinary event of the water scoop. He leaned towards Hal, his hazel eyes dancing, and Hal felt his own eyes must have been dancing too. He nodded the tiniest of nods. Oh, Hal! Uncle Nat gasped, jumping to his feet. Do you know how lucky you are? You've experienced something I never have, and probably never will. There are no water troughs in use anymore. They filled that one specially for this trip. I had my head and shoulders out the window trying to see it, and you were on the footplate. It was amazing! Hal exploded, bouncing up and down on the sofa. Mr. Singh let me blow the whistle. That was you. Yes, and Joey gave me baked beans and potato cooked on the boiler. Hal's insides suddenly deflated as he realised he had broken his promise to Lenny's dad. But I promised I wouldn't tell. Listen. Uncle Nat knelt down in front of him, holding up his right hand. I, Nathaniel Peter Bradshaw, do solemnly swear that I will never tell a living soul that you have been on the footplate of the Highland Falcon, even though I'm jade with jealousy. Hal smiled. Thanks. Uncle Nat hopped back into his chair, grabbing his pen. Now, tell me all about it. It's priceless detail for my article. I couldn't see much out of the window. Hal felt a flutter of panic. He'd only broken half his promise. He mustn't betray Lenny. Changing the subject, he said, Uncle Nat, I feel bad. I haven't read any of your books. Uncle Nat blinked. Oh, I can get you one if you're interested. Mum told me about Steam of the Dragon. That sounds good. My Adventure into China. Uncle Nat put his pen down. Can I read it now? Uncle Nat stroked his chin. We could see if the library has it. Good idea. Hal jumped up. As they entered the library, a figure at the far end started, dropping a leather-bound book to the floor. Apologies, Milo, Uncle Nat said. We didn't mean to make you jump. It's fine. Milo picked up the fallen volume. I was lost in thought. Hal frowned. 10 minutes ago, Milo had been on his way back to his compartment. Why was he now in the library? He stared at the pocket he'd seen Milo put the sparkling object into, but the line of his trousers was flat. Whatever it was gone. Hal is interested in my writing. Uncle Nat smiled down at Hal. I hear your uncle's books are superb. Milo placed the fallen book on the shelf. If you like trains. I do, Hal replied, realising it was true. Right, I think I'll return to my room, Milo said, and left. The library felt and sounded different from the rest of the train. The walls of books deadened the sound of wheels on rails. There were no windows, but a soft light filtered in through 3 small skylights in the roof. 2 armchairs stood either side of a square mahogany table in the middle of the floor. Hal crossed the room to see which book Milo had been reading. He read the spine. The Mating Call of the Mallard Duck. Weird, he whispered. Here we are. Uncle Nat put a pile of books on the table. A History of the World in 13 Railway Journeys, Sleeping Car to St. Petersburg, The Bishop's Branch Line, which I wrote with the lovely Reverend James Challoner, and The Invention of Time. Where's Steam of the Dragon? It appears to be missing. Uncle Nat looked pleased. Someone must be reading it. Hal picked up The Invention of Time. How can someone invent time? Not literally invent it. Before the railways came along, it wasn't important to be accurate about the time, Uncle Nat explained. But if you run a railway, you need a timetable. You have to be exact. The railways change society in different ways, but in particular, how we measure and record time. Hal blinked. That's cool. Uncle Nat's face lit up. My books are stories of travel, but they're also about how railways have changed the world. I have ridden the world's most extraordinary trains, from Stephenson's rocket to the Japanese Shinkansen. The carriage jerked, and Hal stumbled as the Highland Falcon slid to a halt. What's happening? Uncle Nat glanced at one of his watches. It's 10:30. We must be approaching Aberdeen. He stepped over to a framed map of the British Isles, which hung within one of the bookcases. We're here. Uncle Nat ran his finger along a black line parallel with the east coast of Scotland. We've crossed the Tay, passed through Dundee, and come up the coast. He looked at Hal. At Aberdeen, the train turns round. Shall we go and see? Following his uncle from the library, Hal saw a field of tangled rails, grey stones, and defiant thistles out of the window. We're in Ferry Hill sidings. Uncle Nat opened the door at the end of the carriage. Come on. He jumped down to the track bed several feet below. Be careful how you land on the ballast. Huh? The grey stones round the sleepers. A salty summer wind buffeted Hal's cheeks, and he enjoyed the stones crunching under his shoes. We've got to be quick to get a good view, said Uncle Nat, jogging alongside the train. They picked their way over the rails to a low wall and sat down. A grey-backed barred warbler burst out of a thicket of brambles and ivy, trilling at them. Hal guessed the bird's nest must be hidden in the bush. Joey jumped down from the hissing engine, slipping between the tender buffers and the rest of the train. He's uncoupling the Highland Falcon from her carriages, Uncle Nat explained. Joey waved to Lenny's dad on the footplate, who eased the engine forward with 2 chugs of steam. Striding over the rails, Joey made his way to a tall iron lever beside the track. That changes the points, said Uncle Nat, as Joey leaned into the lever. Mahanjeet can now reverse the loco along that parallel track, back this way. Why aren't we going straight into Aberdeen? The track doesn't loop round towards Balata. We have to double back on ourselves and take a different line west. A train can't turn around, so instead the engine moves to the other end of the train. The Highland Falcon will pull us in reverse to Balata. Will I be able to see the engine from the observation car? Hal asked, watching Mr. Singh reverse the locomotive. Uncle Nat nodded. Mahanjeet takes her up to the next set of points, and then... His voice was drowned out by a great shush of water vapour as the Highland Falcon passed them, hooting steam through her whistle. They waved madly in reply. The enormous wheels were as tall as Hal. He pulled out his sketchbook. He had barely drawn the outline of the engine casing when he heard barking. Lady Lansbury's dogs were bounding about in the scrubland beside the track. Rowan Buck followed them with a fistful of tiny black bags. I'd like to be a dog handler when I grow up, Hal said, watching Viking and Trafalgar play fighting in the weeds. And spend your day picking up dog poo? Uncle Nat laughed. Mr. Buck doesn't look too happy to be doing it. The Highland Falcon had huffed up the track, clanking over another set of points. Lenny's dad waited for them to shift and began to drive the loco forward, crawling towards the observation car. Hal continued to sketch, marking the outline of her claret belly and where her golden pipework became visible. Soon we'll be chuffing through the River Dee Valley, Uncle Nat said, watching Joey jog ahead of the engine. Does it take us to the castle? It stops a few miles short, at Balata. The royal family wouldn't have a railway line running through their back garden. A passing intercity express honked its horn, and the Highland Falcon tooted her whistle in reply. Hal held up his picture, comparing it to the engine, and frowned as he caught sight of something white and fluffy moving between the wheels of the observation car. It was Bailey. "Closer, closer," Joey called as the locomotive's giant wheels rolled towards the observation car. Hal leapt to his feet in horror.